The finger so was white against the black steel, knuckles locked, trembling with adrenaline and rage. The 357 Magnum's hammer was cocked, ready to deliver death with the slightest pressure. In the harsh glare of headlights, Steve McQueen stood like an executioner, the gun aimed directly at a figure emerging from a car. But this moment didn't begin with violence. It began with silence. 12 hours earlier, Steve McQueen had been lying in his Beverly Hills bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The clock read 1:47 a.m. Sleep had become a stranger since August 1969. 15 months had passed since the Tate murders. 15 months since he discovered his name at the top of Charles Manson's death list. 15 months of checking locks, scanning faces, and sleeping with a loaded gun under his pillow. The house was secure. Motion sensors, reinforced doors, bodyguards in the guest quarters. But security systems couldn't quiet the voices in his head, the constant whisper that they were still out there. Manson was in prison, but his followers weren't all caught. They were waiting, planning, biding their time. Steve rolled out of bed and dressed in the dark. Jeans, black t-shirt, leather jacket. The 357 Magnum went into its shoulder holster, a familiar weight against his ribs. When sleep wouldn't come, there was only one thing that helped: the road. He walked to the garage, past 3 other cars to the one that mattered, a slate-grey Porsche 911, factory fresh but already worn from countless midnight drives. The engine turned over with a satisfying growl. German engineering built for exactly this kind of therapy. Steve pulled out of the driveway at 2:15 a.m. The streets of Beverly Hills were empty, streetlights casting long shadows between mansions. He drove slowly at first, letting the familiar ritual calm his nerves. Windows down, cool air rushing through his hair, the steady hum of the engine blocking out everything else. By 2:30, he was on the Santa Monica Freeway, heading west toward the ocean. This was his sanctuary, the long stretch of asphalt where speed could outrun fear. The speedometer climbed steadily, 50, 60, and 70 miles per hour. The city lights blurred into streaks of white and amber. For the first time in hours, Steve felt something approaching peace. The Porsche responded to his touch like a thoroughbred racehorse. Every gear change precise, every turn calculated. This was control. This was mastery. This was... Headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. At first, Steve didn't think much of it. Los Angeles never truly slept, and the freeway always had some traffic, even at this hour. Truckers, night shift workers, insomniacs like himself seeking solace in motion. But as the minutes passed, the headlights stayed constant. Same distance, same speed, same lane. Steve's heart rate spiked. He gripped the steering wheel tighter and pressed the accelerator. The Porsche surged forward, but the headlights behind him matched his acceleration perfectly. 80 miles per hour became 90. The following car stayed locked onto his tail. A test. Steve needed to be sure. He moved to the right lane, slowing to 65. The headlights followed. Left lane, speeding up to 95. Still there. Back to the center lane, weaving through the sparse traffic. The headlights copied his every move with mechanical precision. They had found him. The paranoia he'd carried for over a year exploded into raw terror. This was it. The Manson family had finally come to finish what they started. The careful surveillance, the patient stalking, the midnight hunt. They'd been watching his house, learning his patterns, waiting for him to be alone and vulnerable. Steve's breath came in short gasps. His hands were slick with sweat on the leather steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, the headlights seemed to grow larger, closer, like the eyes of a predator moving in for the kill. Not tonight, not like this. Steve McQueen had survived the beaches of Normandy in movies and the racetracks of Le Mans in real life. He had faced down studio executives, motorcycle crashes, and his own demons. He would not die running scared on a California freeway. The Porsche's engine screamed as Steve floored the accelerator. The tachometer needle swept toward the red line. 100 miles per hour, 110, 120. The world outside became a blur of speed and fury. Other cars flashed past like stationary objects. Lane changes became split-second decisions made on instinct and racing experience, but the headlights stayed with him. Whoever was driving that car had skill, patience, and determination. They matched his speed through every turn, every lane change, every desperate attempt to break free. This wasn't some amateur cult member playing at assassination. This was a professional. The chase stretched on for miles. Santa Monica, to Venice, to Manhattan Beach, and back. Steve's mind raced as fast as his engine. How many were in the car? Were they armed? Did they want to kill him on the freeway or force him to stop somewhere isolated? Were there other cars involved? Other members of the family coordinating the attack? 5 miles of white-knuckle terror, 5 miles of high-speed chess between hunter and prey. Then Steve made a decision that would haunt him forever. Enough running. Time to face them. He slammed on the brakes with the precision of a professional driver. The Porsche's tires screamed against asphalt as the car decelerated from over 100 miles per hour to 20 in seconds. Steve yanked the steering wheel hard right, then left, sending the car into a controlled drift that left it sideways across 2 lanes of freeway, blocking the road completely. The engine ticked as it cooled. Steam rose from the overheated brakes. In the sudden silence, Steve could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. The following car had no choice but to stop. Its headlights illuminated the Porsche's flanks, like spotlights on a stage. For a moment, both vehicles sat motionless in the empty freeway, 2 predators sizing each other up before the final confrontation. Steve opened his door and stepped out. His hand moved to the .357 Magnum with practiced smoothness. The gun cleared leather and came up in a 2-handed grip. Hammer cocked, barrel aimed directly at the windshield of the other car. 15 feet separated him from his would-be killers, close enough that he couldn't miss, close enough that they couldn't escape. "Get out!" Steve's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Get out of the fucking car right now." His finger found the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure would fire the weapon. 2 pounds of pressure would end whatever nightmare had been chasing him for over a year. The gun's sights were lined up perfectly. On the driver's side of the windshield, the other car's door opened slowly. A man stepped out, with his hands raised high in the air. He was young, maybe 25, with sandy brown hair and a terrified expression. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khaki pants. No leather jacket, no cult tattoos, no wild eyes or Manson family stare. He looked like an accountant. "Please don't shoot," the man said, his voice shaking. "Please, I'm not armed. I'm not going to hurt you." Steve kept the gun trained on him, but confusion began to crack through his rage. This wasn't what he'd expected. Where were the other family members? Where were the knives, the rope, the ritual murder weapons? "Who are you?" Steve demanded. "Why were you following me?" The man's hands trembled in the air. "My name is David Chen. I'm a reporter for Automotive Weekly. I recognized your car from the racing circuit. I've been trying to get an interview with you for months, but your people always say no." The words hit Steve like a physical blow. A reporter, not a killer, not a cult member, not a Manson family assassin. A fucking reporter. "I saw you driving tonight, and I thought maybe if I could just talk to you informally, you might give me 5 minutes about your racing career. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just trying to keep up, so I could flag you down at a gas station or something." Steve's gun hand began to shake. The .357 was suddenly impossibly heavy in his grip. He'd been ready to kill this man. He'd been seconds away from pulling the trigger and ending an innocent life because his paranoid mind had turned a curious journalist into a murderous stalker. "I'm so sorry," David continued, tears now running down his face. "I had no idea you'd think I was threatening you. I just wanted to talk about cars." The gun lowered slowly, as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Steve's arm fell to his side, the weapon pointing harmlessly at the asphalt. The adrenaline that had carried him through the chase now turned toxic in his veins, leaving him nauseated and shaking. "Jesus," Steve whispered. "Jesus Christ, I almost killed you." The magnitude of what had nearly happened crashed over him like a wave. 15 minutes earlier, he'd been ready to commit murder, not in self-defense, not in protection of his family, but because his own fear had transformed an innocent man into a monster. David lowered his hands slowly, still ready to run if necessary. "Are you okay, Mr. McQueen? You seem really upset." Upset. Steve almost laughed at the understatement. He was fucking destroyed. The man he'd thought he was. The hero he'd played on screen. The cool professional who could handle anything had just evaporated in the headlights of a freeway confrontation. "I thought you were someone else," Steve said, holstering the gun with trembling hands. "Someone dangerous." "I'm just a car guy," David said, his voice still shaky but gaining strength as he realized he wasn't going to be shot. "I write about racing, about drivers like you. You're a legend in the automotive world." A legend. Steve had been called that before, usually in reference to his acting or his racing career. But legends weren't supposed to pull guns on innocent reporters. Legends weren't supposed to live in terror of their own shadows. "Look," Steve said, running his hands through his hair. "I need you to forget this happened. All of it. The chase. The gun. Everything." David nodded quickly. "Of course, I understand." "Do you? Do you really understand?" Steve's voice carried an edge of desperation. "Because if this gets out, if people know that Steve McQueen is driving around Los Angeles at 2 in the morning pulling guns on reporters, it's going to destroy more than just my career. It would destroy his sanity. It would prove that the Manson family had succeeded in killing him after all. Just not in the way they'd planned. They'd turned him into someone he didn't recognize, someone capable of almost murdering an innocent man because of a license to paranoia he'd given himself." David seemed to understand the weight of the moment. "Mr. McQueen, I give you my word, as a journalist, as a man, I will never speak about this to anyone, ever." They stood there for another minute in the harsh glare of the headlights. Two men brought together by a collision of fear and misunderstanding. Finally, Steve walked back to his Porsche and got behind the wheel. The engine started easily, but his hand shook as he put it in gear. He drove home in silence, the reporter's car following at a respectful distance until their paths diverged in Beverly Hills. Steve parked in his garage and sat in the darkness for 20 minutes, replaying every second of the encounter. The paranoia that had protected him for over a year had nearly turned him into a killer. The fear that had kept him alive had almost made him a monster. And the worst part was that he wasn't sure it wouldn't happen again. Steve McQueen went inside his fortress of a house, double-checked all the locks, and set the alarm system. But for the first time since the Tate murders, the biggest threat to his safety wasn't the shadows outside his windows. It was the man staring back at him in the mirror.